Hello again, everybody. Thank you for joining me again on another episode of Powerhouse University. I am delighted to yet again be accompanied by Miss Karen Carr-Crawford, who was with us last episode to have a discussion on how to grow and scale your business. Thank you, Miss Karen, for joining me again today.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me. I always enjoy coming. We had a good time last time, so this is fun. I enjoy this.
Yes, we did. And then we
Yeah.
we we had a couple of good talk points last time too. And in the conversation that we had last time, for others that want to go back and review it, that is where we talked about key performance indicators and standard operating procedures. And Ms. Karen broke down exactly what those were and why and how they are important when it comes to growing and scaling your business. Uh, that was, I want to thank you again for that information. It was very educational. So, for those who have not seen it, I definitely suggest going in and viewing that information. Okay, Miss Karen. So, on the topic of uncovering who your target market is and getting to the end goal of knowing who to market to, one of the basics or the general criteria is understanding psychographics and demographics. Can you break down what both of those are?
Sure. Let's kind of put it in the context of customer persona so that we have a sense of where we're headed. So if we start with psychographics and demographics, we're starting to build out the persona so we understand more about who our target is. So psychographics are more the personal attributes, interests, hobbies, lifestyle, um, things that that person does outside of the data points that usually define them when we talk about demographics. We talk about income, age, education, where they live, number of, how large the household is, that kind of thing. So those demographic points are more of the data points that define them based on, just characteristics that we tend to capture just to kind of track where people are situated, how they're situated. Um, and then psychographics, kind of layer over that because we're talking now about, what they do. The demographics just tell us one piece. Psychographics are much more, comprehensive. And we start to look at, their interests, et cetera, because it's important to understand where we will meet them, right? If we just have demographics, that's just not enough to tell us, who they are and what they do. The psychographics actually give us more of that input.
When it comes to value proposition, how do
Mhm.
you hone in more on what that is and how to market to your customers or
Yeah.
potential clients
Yeah.
after
So your
that?
value proposition comes, first. That's the early part. That's the work you do first before you actually start talking about the customer. Sometimes it happens simultaneously, but really you need to understand what you are doing so differently in the marketplace that um, attracts the customer, right? You've got to define what you do and for who. And it really needs to be specific around your product or service. And you begin to look at, how you stand out, what differentiates you. And then you start looking at the type of customer that's most suitable for what it is you do, what solution you are providing, and what that customer, how you bridge that customer to your solution.
After we do the value proposition, it's also important to understand your competitors too and doing a competitive analysis. Can you break down why that is important and why, especially as a new business owner, someone would want to do this in order to be able to stand out in the marketplace?
Sure, sure. I mean, obviously, the competitive marketplace is critically important to you, particularly if you're launching as a new business. Pricing is important. You want to look at, pricing strategies for your competitors. You want to look at marketing strategies. You want to look at what they're doing that works. I mean, if they've got staying power, there's something that work is working. You want to look at the business model. What is the model? What are they doing in the diversity of revenue streams? What are they doing that can enhance what you may be doing? So you're not looking at it so you can start, necessarily undercutting. Let's make that kind of clear. We're not trying to get in and necessarily pull people away. We want to look at what's working. And many times, I've heard business owners talk about how they collaborate with competitors. So, that opportunity may exist as well. So it's really understanding what's working and what's not working and where the gap is for you to come in and possibly fill, or where you may be able to collaborate even.
Yes. And then too, that also determines how you get to your end user, I would assume as well, right? Because this is when you have to define if you are targeting the user for the product, if you're
Mhm.
segmenting out the decision maker, or
Mhm.
if, you're targeting both.
Absolutely. That's an excellent and very critical point because the user is so yeah, we have user, decision maker, and or both. The user is the person who is generally interacting with the product or service on a regular basis. So they have the firsthand experience using, whatever it is, whatever you sell. The decision maker, on the other hand, is somebody who has to sign the check, has to approve the invoice, has to say, this is within our budget. We can buy it because we can use it and it gives us significant ROI. We can see the return. So the decision maker may be that final person who has to sign, like we say, sign the check. But that, could mean a number of things, but signing the check. And then both may mean the user may have to have some experience with the product or service, and that user may be communicating to the decision maker what they feel is best about the product or service, right? So then the decision maker makes an informed decision about making the purchase. So it can be both. So the decision maker says, well, you use the trial, and we see this with software, try to use the trial package for 14 or 30 days, and then tell me if you feel this is the best solution for our work flow at this time. So that person goes back to the decision maker. These are the positives for this, few negatives, but I think it'll work. And the decision maker says, let's go with it. So we have some of that. A lot of the time, another way you might see that, if I try to think of something like maybe a travel agency, where a travel agency sells to both consumers and then corporate. You got B2C and you've got B2B. So I've got travel agents who are experienced in both sides. So B2C, I've got a family, they come in, they want to book travel with the family full of the family with children. They are outdoor people, outdoors kind of folks, and they've got children who want to also, have a good time as well. So you have to take all that in consideration. So as a travel agent, maybe I start sending some emails to them regarding, maybe a Disney cruise or a travel in Yosemite or something like that. Um, and the parents will go to the children and say, look, kids, this is all fun. Look at all this good stuff. What do you guys want to do? They are the users of the experience too. The kids are the users, but the parents obviously are making the decision because they've got to pay for it, right? So the kids don't have the money to pay for it, but the parents want the kids to be happy because they don't want them complaining the whole time. So they go to them and say, hey, look at this. This is fun. Look at all these beautiful pictures, and we can do this and that. And so that's an example of where you've got user and, decision maker coming together to make a purchase. And that's not at all unusual. Another example might be that same example with the travel agency is the business side. So I've got, B2B, and I work with a corporate client, and the HR or manager or somebody has said, this is the budget for travel, individual travel, here's some options. They can pick this, or this. And this is typically the per diem for travel. And then this is the spend for travel. So the user is the employee. They go into a website, they make a selection, and then, they book the travel through the agency. But the decision maker has already said, this is what you have. Whether you like to travel on private jets or whether you want to travel, this is what we're doing here today.
Right.
So we've got this, and this is how you handle it. And so the decision maker this is an example where the user is not really having any impact on, that final decision. And of course, unless something just goes really crazy and they say, well, this is not the best experience or something like that, we need to pick something else. But still, the decision maker is the one in this scenario who is the one you are marketing to. So that's where I'm going with it. The travel agent would then have, collateral information, content that goes to that business lead to talk about efficiency and cost management and control around travel. Whereas with the family, a situation where they want to do Disney cruise or a trip to Yosemite or something, they want to make sure that everybody feels happy and all this. So the stuff is a little bit different. You're seeing information that's fun and light and all that. So, what I might send, a family would be very different, obviously, to what I might send a business manager, what I would send a business manager.
Yeah. And okay, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but I am trying to break down what I just heard. So it sounds like when it comes to target marketing and the travel agent example, if you and a partner are going on a vacation, that is business to consumer. If
You're
you
correct.
if you and your partner are taking your children, that is a example of both. You are the decision maker and the user because you're going as a family.
Well, you
Because it
want to
has
get
to
the
also appeal
users
to
are
the
the
children.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah.
kids are going to be involved too, and you want them to have a good time. Yeah, so that's where the user and decision maker are both involved in that final outcome.
Yes, in the both. And then when it is the definition of business to business, this is the travel company that is basically contracted with another business in order to have handle the travel arrangements for their
Correct.
employees.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, that
Yeah.
makes sense. And then you also said that you have to have different marketing strategies for basically all three, however you or two or three, I'm assuming, depending on how you
Hmm.
break it down.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then when you do that, would you say that there is how many, from your own opinion, how many different marketing, I guess, how do I say this? You could have your marketing material, I guess you could say, that targets
Hmm.
businesses. You could have your marketing material that targets kids. Would you say that someone would want to use all three in their marketing?
It depends. It depends. It depends on the sales cycle, and you may have if you have lengthy sales cycles, you may have different types of things that go to people depending on where they're at in the buyer's journey. So for example, getting back to if I'm a user of software and I'm still deciding whether or not we're going to buy the software in the early stages before I tell my boss, I like this. This is good. I use the trial, I play around with the trial, but when I'm first kind of exploring, um, I sign up for the free trial. It sends me to a landing page with the demonstration, right, with the demo. That's one type of marketing. That's the strategy. I want to get people on my site so they can see it. So that's one aspect. So they see it and they play around with it. I see they sign up and I see they log in, all that kind of stuff. So that's one way of marketing. And that strategy is I want to get people on my site. That's one way of approaching it. So I get people to the demo, they look at the demo and they sign up. I then continue to engage them so that I get them to buy, right? So we talked about the buyer's journey and the various stages. Now, that doesn't mean because they use the demo that they're going to buy. They may use the demo and realize it's not for them and they just go on. So, but in the case when I was talking at the beginning, when we started, and I said the person used the software and said, yeah, it's good. It has this, this, and this, and we can move on. That's one example of where that purchase comes into play. But on the other hand, if I am the business owner or the salesperson in this business and I'm not seeing traction, I'm continuing to do things that I want to engage them to keep moving through that funnel, right? So we've got our journey, we've got our funnel, and I want people to keep looking at what I have. So, they sign up for the demo, then I may send an email, hey, uh, uh, Jane, I saw you, signed up. What questions do you have? Let's talk, et cetera, et cetera. We keep messing around with the software. I still haven't purchased, so, 7 days later, see you're still in there. Can I help you with anything? Is there anything special? So your strategy may mean I just want to get these people on my site. I want to get them there. But I continue to engage them in ways. So I may use email, I may make some phone calls, I may text them, I don't, whatever it might be to get them moving forward. Now they don't always move forward with purchase. I just said sometimes they do, and in this case that we talked about, they made a purchase. But the the strategy is one thing, and so the strategy speaks to the overarching outcome. What do I want to have happen? Then how do I do that? Those are the tactics. What does it take? So we talk about this overarching piece, and the tactics are email, live demos, sales call, whatever it might be. So those are the things you need to consider. The strategy tells us what we want to have happen. Okay.
Okay, and then that makes sense. And then you also mentioned sales cycle too,
Mhm.
because that makes sense because you have to know how long it's going to take your customer
Mhm.
to go from, like you said, from trial to
Mhm.
purchase, and
Mhm.
understanding how to touch those people, when to touch those people, and developing the cycle and
Absolutely. And that
understanding.
takes some time. That takes
Mhm,
some time. You need to understand, particularly for a new business, that's going to take some time to really understand what that cycle looks like.
mhm.
You may have some sense of what it traditionally looks like or what it typically looks like, but in your business, you may need a little more time to kind of flush that out. And then you talk about these touch points. I mean, we need to think about what we need to look at our data to see when people are moving through the funnel and how they're moving. And so then you start thinking about what I need to do more consistently. What's happening at what point. So those data points are important when you start thinking about marketing. What are we going to repeat? What's working? What's not working? So that's why we have software that automates all that stuff, so you can look at that and really make some determination.
Yeah. And then would you say that someone practices it for what, 6 months, and then after that they're like, it doesn't work, let's try a different sales cycle? And I'm talking about from a person who just started a business. How long do
Right.
they you think that they should try the strategy before maybe deciding to shift it a little bit?
Yeah, I would say 6 months is the least you should do. I mean, at least give it something 6 months, whatever that strategy might be. I was suggesting one strategy of getting people to come to a website or landing page and then to a website. That's one way of doing it. Maybe it's a discovery call, whatever it is, you need to give it some room to run, right?
And I would
So,
think that it also
mhm.
depends too on who you are targeting when it
Yeah,
if
yeah,
it's business to business, business to
absolutely.
consumer, business to
Yeah.
government, etc.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if it's
Absolutely.
the
I mean, it's
government,
going to
it's going to
depend
probably
because it's
take
not going
them
to be the
years.
same. You're right. It's not the same for each segment.
Hmm.
Depending on who you're talking to and talking with, the solution may need to be presented much sooner than, you might think. And so we'll have another conversation about buyer's journey and talk about touch points and things you do at various intersections, and what you can and can't do depending on what you should or may do, not can or can't, what you should or may do, based on who you are trying to target. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
because that was actually my next question is when you go through the sales cycle and you discover what works, what's next. So I'm assuming the what next is trying to understand the buyer's journey and understanding when, where, and why they decided to purchase your product or why they decided not to.
What activated them? Yes, yes. Did they respond to an email and they said, "Yeah, this looks good"? Did they, they saw an ad? Or what was it that activated the purchase? And at what point in the journey? I mean, some people go from, we talk about ADAR, and awareness is the very first stage that they go from awareness to purchase. It's not necessarily linear. They can jump from start all the way to the purchasing, decision. Um, Depending on the urgency, where they're at, depending on, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it depends on that particular segment.
Okay. Which that makes sense. So yes, that would I would say would lead us to our next conversation that we can have
Absolutely.
together is understanding the buyer's journey. So, this was a very informative conversation that we had today. We touched on the demographics, business models, understanding, different demographics, if I said that already, and value propositions, competitive analysis, et cetera, et cetera. And so, before letting you go, is there anything that you would want to add to this topic that you think will be important?
Well, I think it's important that business owners really approach every criteria that I noted. They need to make sure they check in on all the pieces and don't assume that they know the competitive space well and all that because they've kind of, seen people or seen a business in motion or in action. You really need to do a deep dive. It's not just, I know them and I've been in their store. I know what they do. It's not as simple as that. Or I've looked at their website. I know what they do. You really need to take a deep dive into that landscape, the competitive landscape. And the other thing I didn't mention was then looking at the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Those go hand in hand. So that SWOT analysis is really important to do after the competitive analysis so you have a sense of where you are positioned. That really helps you kind of see your place in the market after doing, that competitor analysis.
Yes. And that's when you do your entire marketing cycle, I'm assuming, and you write down what works and what doesn't. Is that what SWOT?
Well, I mean, the marketing piece comes kind of hand in hand, but the SWOT just kind of helps you see what your capacity is really. Looking at all of this in total, looking at your capacity. If you're talking about a business, you're comparing yourself to businesses that are well capitalized and have strong customer base, then we start looking at the SWOT and saying, maybe we're not quite there yet. How do we compensate or what are our solutions? How do we work through that? What's the workaround? We don't have as much capital, or at least not as much capital to invest into marketing at this point. So that's where yes, to answer your question, I'm saying yes. Yes. Then you start thinking about what is the strategy given where we're at after doing this deep dive.
Okay, next. And the more I have these conversations, period, the more I understand how much patience it takes, especially in the beginning stages of
Yeah.
starting a business, because everything is about trial and error. Even when it comes to
Oh,
marketing and
yeah.
understanding, these cycles, how long is your cycle, as far as your marketing cycle, how long does it take for, a customer, for someone to be, when you go and target them, to how long it takes them to become a customer. It all takes time.
Hmm.
And as much as business owners want to start a business today and make money tomorrow, it's definitely a game of patience and virtue and being
And
able to and
planning. I mean,
planning.
you've got a
Definitely.
plan. You have to have a plan. You've got to plan for success so that you are more intentional and proactive. So I've got a plan that says I've got to get X number of revenue or X new customers or whatever it might be. What is it going to take to get there? And then what can I do if I don't have, $500,000 to dump into marketing for the year? What can I do differently? Maybe it's about just, really getting out and getting to know people, making relationships stronger, hitting some of these networking pieces and all that. Some of that stuff is not so terribly expensive. You might have to pay for lunch or dinner or whatever, but it's not, going to run up a huge marketing budget. So, those are the things you have to think. How do I overcompensate as a small business owner? How do I work around this?
Yes, you have to get
Yeah,
out there and get it done by any means.
by any
Uh,
means.
yes, okay. So I'm happy that we had a opportunity to cover this topic today on defining your target market and knowing that we have a conversation for next time and understanding what the next steps are. So like always, Miss Karen, it is a pleasure speaking with you. I appreciate you for being a consistent guest here on Powerhouse. And for everybody tuning in right now, thank you again. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And Miss Karen and I will be with you again on another episode of Powerhouse You. So you enjoy your day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.